The wind howling off the Aegean Sea is bitter, thick with the smell of salt and sweat. Under the brutal midday sun, you hear the rhythmic, suffocating sound of iron pickaxes striking solid stone. Welcome to the Penal Colony of Patmos. It is the end of the 1st century, and the Roman Empire has sentenced an aging political prisoner to hard labor. His name is John. His crime is treason. He absolutely refuses to bow down and call the Emperor of Rome his Lord and God. But John is not just breaking rocks in the dirt. By the flickering light of a smuggled oil lamp, he is writing a letter, a subversive, highly illegal, deeply encrypted underground resistance manual. And he is sending it to 7 churches scattered across Asia Minor. These are ordinary people, bakers, merchants, mothers, and slaves, who are being hunted down. If they are caught reading John's letter, they will be thrown to the wild animals in the public arena. When you open the book of Revelation today, sitting in the safety of your living room, it is easy to get completely lost. You see massive red dragons sweeping stars from the sky, mutant locusts boiling out of a bottomless pit, and grotesque, multi-headed beasts rising out of the ocean. But you have to understand exactly what you are reading. The book of Revelation is not a futuristic sci-fi horror movie. It is not a drug-induced hallucination. It is not a bizarre puzzle meant to be solved by 21st century internet sleuths trying to predict the exact date of the end of the world. It is apocalyptic literature. In the original Greek, the word is apocalypsis. To modern ears, that sounds like a global catastrophe. But in the 1st century, it simply meant an unveiling, a pulling back of the curtain. John is using a brilliant, unbreakable ancient Jewish code to show these terrified, persecuted Christians the unseen spiritual war driving the brutal political machine of Rome. The terrifying monsters you read about in this book are not aliens. They are historical empires, psychopathic dictators, and the timeless spiritual forces operating in the shadows behind them. And there is one specific nightmare in this book that proves exactly how this ancient code works. In the 9th chapter of Revelation, John describes a swarm of demonic locusts rising from a bottomless abyss. He says they have the faces of men, the teeth of lions, the long hair of women, and heavy armor made of solid iron. For centuries, people have tried to argue that John was looking into the future, frantically trying to describe modern attack helicopters or alien spacecraft. But what if John was not looking at the future at all? What if this bizarre, horrifying description perfectly matched a very real, aggressively brutal military threat that every single 1st century Roman citizen was already having active nightmares about? We are going to decode the exact historical and spiritual identities of every major beast, dragon, and creature in the book of Revelation. We are going to strip away the wild conspiracy theories and look straight at the brutal historical reality. And we will start by pulling back the curtain on the cosmic control room itself. Before you can understand the monsters, you have to understand the blood soaking the ground they walk on. Imagine you are standing in the city square of Pergamum in the 1st century. The Roman guards drag a man named Antipas into the center of the crowd. He is a pastor, a friend of John. The local governor demands that you and Antipas do one simple thing to save your lives. Take a pinch of incense, drop it on the altar, and declare that the reigning emperor, Domitian, is Dominus et Deus, Lord and God. Antipas refuses. He is stripped and forced inside a massive hollow brass sculpture of a bull. The guards lock the metal door and light a roaring fire underneath its belly. The brass slowly heats until it glows red. Antipas is roasted alive. This is not a myth. This is historical fact. This is the terrifying suffocating reality you and the first Christians were living in. You are being slaughtered by a political machine that demands absolute worship. So in the 4th chapter of Revelation, God does not just give John a message of comfort. He violently rips open the sky. He pulls John up into the actual control room of the universe to show him who is really in charge. John looks and sees a throne, and standing around that throne are the first creatures we need to decode, the 4 living creatures. John says one has the face of a lion, one looks like an ox, one has the face of a man, and one looks like a flying eagle. They are covered in eyes and have 6 wings. For decades, sensationalists have tried to tell you these are extraterrestrial beings or genetic mutations. They completely miss the ancient Jewish symbolism. In the original Greek, John calls them the Zoa, the living ones. They are the cherubim. In the ancient Near East, these 4 specific faces were universally understood symbols. They represented the absolute pinnacle of all physical creation. The lion is the king of the wild beasts. The ox is the king of the domesticated animals. The eagle is the king of the birds. And man is the crown of creation. And what are these supreme representatives of the physical universe doing? They are bowing down. Day and night, they are endlessly singing that the Lord God Almighty is holy. Think about what this means to you. As a terrified Christian reading this letter, the emperor in Rome claims he rules the world. He prints his face on your coins. He burns your friends alive if you do not worship him. But John is pulling back the curtain to show you the truth. All of creation, every atom in the universe answers to the throne of God. Domitian's claim to rule the world is a pathetic, temporary joke. But John looks deeper. He looks beyond the physical world and exposes the real enemy driving the Roman slaughter. In the 12th chapter, he sees a great red dragon. It is a terrifying, grotesque monster with 7 heads, 10 horns, and 7 crowns, massive enough to sweep 1/3 of the stars from the sky with its tail. This is not a dinosaur. This is the ancient cosmic puppet master. John explicitly identifies this creature as the ancient serpent, the devil. He is the dark spiritual force manipulating the earthly empires from the shadows. Here is what most people completely misunderstand about the dragon. You often hear people talk about the dragon as if he is waiting in the future to attack humanity. But John shows you a war that has already fractured heaven. He watches as the ultimate celestial military commander, the Archangel Michael, leads his angels against the dragon. It is a violent, unseen spiritual war, and the dragon loses. Michael hurls the great red dragon down to the dirt. He is stripped of his heavenly access. But this victory in heaven creates immediate terror on earth. The dragon is cast down, and he is enraged because he knows his time is incredibly short. He knows he is a defeated enemy on a leash. So he turns all of his burning fury toward the followers of Jesus. He is coming for John. He is coming for Antipas, and he is coming for you. But the dragon is a spirit. He does not show up in your physical world with a pitchfork and red scales. He needs a body. He needs a physical system to carry out his violence. So he goes down to the shore of the sea, and he calls up a monster. The dragon is standing on the sand of the sea. He has been thrown out of heaven, and now he wants to tear the earth apart. But he does not do it with pitchforks and paranormal hauntings, the way Hollywood imagines. He does it through politics. He does it through systems. He does it by building an empire. To keep pulling back the curtain on the real history of the Bible, stripping away the cheap myths to see the actual spiritual war happening right in front of you. Take a second to subscribe. This channel is built to give you the unvarnished historical truth without the fluff. And we need to get straight back to the shores of the Mediterranean. Because the water is churning, the beast is rising, and it is about to demand your absolute allegiance. The dragon stands on the sand of the shore. John watches as the water violently churns. From the dark, chaotic waves of the Mediterranean Sea, a monster rises. John calls it a therion. In ancient Greek, this does not just mean a wild animal. It means a savage, uncontrollable, bloodthirsty predator. It has 7 heads and 10 horns, and on its horns are 10 crowns. It looks like a leopard, but it has the massive, crushing feet of a bear and the terrifying mouth of a lion. For 2,000 years, people have frantically tried to map these heads and horns onto modern politicians, European unions, or secret global societies, but they completely miss the historical terror staring you right in the face. To a first-century Jewish mind, the sea was the ultimate symbol of chaos and death, and out of the geopolitical chaos of the ancient Mediterranean world rose the ultimate, unstoppable political machine, the Roman Empire. Rome was a beast. It devoured sovereign nations. It crushed rebellions with iron swords and endless rows of wooden crosses. The dragon, the dark spiritual force of Satan, hands his power, his throne, and his absolute authority directly to this political empire. John is showing you that the Roman state, when it demands the worship that belongs only to God, becomes a demonic instrument. It becomes a therion, a savage, godless machine. And the entire world is mesmerized by it. The text says the whole earth marveled as they followed the beast, crying out, "Who is like the beast, and who can fight against it?" Think about how that felt for you as a first-century Christian. You walk through the streets of Ephesus or Smyrna. You see the massive marble temples dedicated to the Roman emperors. You see the invincible Roman legions marching through your streets. You see the wealth, the aqueducts, the sheer crushing dominance of Rome, and you feel entirely insignificant. Who can fight against it? It feels completely impossible to you. But the beast from the sea does not work alone. John sees a second beast. This one rises out of the earth. It has 2 horns like a lamb, but it speaks like a dragon. It does not look like a terrifying military conqueror. It looks religious. It looks local. This second beast represents the local enforcers, the propaganda machine, and the imperial cult. It is their job to make sure you worship the first beast. We actually have Roman historical documents that prove exactly how this second beast operated. Just a few years after John wrote Revelation, a Roman governor named Pliny the Younger wrote a letter to the Emperor Trajan. Pliny governed a province in Asia Minor, very close to the churches John was writing to. In his letter, Pliny describes exactly how he deals with people accused of being Christians. He brings a statue of the emperor and statues of the Roman gods into your town square. He arrests you and your fellow believers, forcing you to offer wine and incense to the image of the emperor. If you refuse, he interrogates you 3 times, threatening you with death. If you still refuse to bow, Pliny writes, "I ordered them to be executed." This is the exact historical reality John is describing. The beast from the earth, forcing you to worship the image of the first beast. It is not a futuristic sci-fi scenario. It was happening in the public squares of your own world. Stay with me, because this changes everything you thought you knew about the mark. John says this second beast forces everyone, small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and no one can buy or sell anything unless they have this mark. Today, people panic over microchips, barcodes, and vaccines, terrified they might accidentally take the mark of the beast. But John's original audience would have immediately recognized this as a dark, twisted parody of their own sacred scriptures. In the book of Deuteronomy, God gives the Israelites the Shema, the central prayer of the Jewish faith. God tells them to take His laws and bind them as a sign on their hands and on their foreheads. Orthodox Jews literally wear small leather boxes containing scripture called tefillin on their foreheads and their arms. God's mark means your allegiance, your thoughts, represented by your forehead, and your actions, represented by your hand, belong entirely to Him. The mark of the beast is the exact opposite. The Roman Empire is demanding that your thoughts and your actions belong to the state. And if you refuse to compromise, the beast hits you exactly where it hurts you the most, your wallet. In the ancient Roman world, you could not participate in the local trade guilds if you did not participate in the guild's pagan sacrifices. You were locked out of the economy. You could not buy food in the marketplace. You could not sell your goods. You were economically canceled. You either compromised your faith to feed your family, or you starved in the streets. That is the crushing weight of the mark. But it gets stranger. John ends this terrifying chapter with a riddle. He says, "Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. His number is 666. This number has fueled more wild speculation and fear than almost any other verse in the Bible. But John tells you to calculate it. He is inviting his readers to use a system you already know intimately. It is an ancient Jewish cipher called gematria. In both the Hebrew and Greek languages, there were no separate numbers. Every letter of the alphabet also carried a numerical value, so every name could be added up to a specific sum. John is writing from a Roman prison. If he openly writes that the Emperor of Rome is a demonic beast, his letter will be intercepted, destroyed, and his messengers will be killed, so he encrypts the target's name. When you take the name and title of the most brutal psychopathic emperor in Roman history, Nero Caesar, and you translate it into Hebrew, the letters spell Nero Caesar. The value of the letter Nun is 50, 200, Wa is 6, Nun is 50, Kof is 100, Samek is 60, and Resh is 200. You add them together, and the sum is exactly 666. Nero Caesar was the first Roman emperor to systematically hunt down and slaughter Christians. According to the Roman historian Tacitus, Nero blamed the Great Fire of Rome on the Christians. Tacitus writes that Nero had them torn apart by dogs, nailed to crosses, and coated in pitch to be set on fire, serving as human torches to illuminate his imperial gardens at night. Nero was the blueprint. He was the ultimate trauma for the early church. By the time John is writing this under the reign of Domitian, the church is terrified that Nero has essentially come back to life in the form of this new tyrant. The beast is Rome. The number points to the ultimate Roman tyrant, and the mark is the absolute demand that you surrender your soul to the state just to survive. But just when the Roman beast seems absolutely invincible, John hears a sound rising from a bottomless pit. God is about to unleash a judgment so terrifying, it makes the Roman legions look like children playing with wooden swords. Just when the Roman beast seems absolutely invincible, John hears a sound that shakes the foundation of the earth. He sees a star fall from heaven to the ground, and he watches as an angel is given the key to the shaft of the bottomless pit, the abyss. When the angel turns the key, smoke violently pours out of the pit like the smoke of a massive furnace. The sun and the sky are completely darkened, and out of that suffocating black smoke, a swarm of locusts descends onto the earth. Their king is the angel of the abyss, whose name in Hebrew is Abaddon, and in Greek Apollyon, the destroyer, And this brings us back to the exact mystery we started with. The nightmare of the 9th chapter. John says these are not normal locusts. They look like horses prepared for battle. They have faces like human men, but they have the long, flowing hair of women. They have teeth like lions. They wear heavy breastplates of solid iron. The sound of their wings is like the deafening roar of many horse-drawn chariots rushing into battle. And most terrifying of all, they have tails with stingers, exactly like scorpions, designed to torment people for 5 months. If you read this with a 21st century mindset, it sounds exactly like a fleet of military attack helicopters. But John was not writing to the 21st century. He was writing to a group of terrified Christians in the 1st century who were currently being hunted by Rome. To understand the locusts, you have to understand the one thing the Roman Empire was genuinely terrified of. Rome conquered everything it touched, but they had one massive vulnerability on their eastern border across the Euphrates River: the Parthian Empire. The Parthian military was legendary, and they had absolutely humiliated the Roman legions in combat. They were the ultimate geopolitical nightmare for every Roman citizen. And how did the Parthians fight? They used highly advanced, heavily armored cavalry. Historical accounts describe the Parthian heavy cavalry wearing overlapping, scale-like iron armor that completely covered the riders and their horses. To a 1st century observer, these were literal iron breastplates. But what about the faces of men and the hair of women? The Parthians were famous for refusing to cut their hair. They rode into battle with long, wild hair streaming behind them in the wind. A deliberate psychological tactic to look like savage barbarians and strike terror into the disciplined, short-haired Roman soldiers. And the sound of their charge, thousands of heavily armored horses thundering across your plains, sounded exactly like a roaring swarm of chariots. But the most famous Parthian tactic of all was something military historians still call the Parthian shot. When the Parthian cavalry charged, they would suddenly turn their horses around and pretend to retreat. The Roman infantry would break their shield walls and chase them. But as the Parthians rode away, they would twist their bodies backward in the saddle and fire a devastating volley of arrows directly into the pursuing Romans. They literally struck their enemies from behind as they rode away. They had tails that stung like scorpions. John is not describing alien spacecraft. He is doing something far more brilliant. He is telling you, the persecuted church, that the invincible Roman beast is going to be judged, and God is going to unleash the dark, demonic forces of the abyss, using the exact geopolitical nightmare that Rome fears the most. The empire that burns you alive will eventually be torn apart by its own terrifying enemies. The beast is not invincible. It is already bleeding. But what does this mean for you today? It is incredibly easy to look back at ancient Rome, at the statues of Nero and Domitian, and think of the beast as an ancient relic. We think the beast died when Rome fell. But the beast did not die. It just changed its clothes. The beast from the sea represents any political system, any empire, or any human government that elevates itself to the place of God. And the beast from the earth represents the propaganda machines that force you to comply. We do not have bronze statues of Roman emperors in our town squares demanding incense, but you live in a world governed by massive political ideologies, technological conglomerates, and cultural systems that demand your absolute, unquestioning allegiance. What happens when a modern system demands your ideological purity? What happens when you are told that if you do not bow down to the cultural narrative of the day, you will be canceled, you will lose your job? You will be locked out of the social and economic systems of your community. That is the exact same spirit of the mark of the beast. It is the demand that your mind and your actions belong to the empire. It is the terrifying realization that if you refuse to compromise your faith in Jesus Christ, the system will try to crush you. The pressure you feel today when you stand up for the truth of the Bible is the exact same beast that burned Antipas alive. The stakes are eternal, and the war is happening right now in your own life. So what do you take away from this ancient resistance manual? First, the book of Revelation is not a map of futuristic sci-fi monsters. It is a brilliant, encrypted record of historical and spiritual reality. The beasts were real, brutal empires like Rome. The locusts were real, terrifying armies like the Parthian Cavalry. And the dragon driving them is the exact same ancient spiritual force operating in the shadows of our world today. Second, you have to look at your own life and ask a deeply uncomfortable question. Who or what is currently demanding your ultimate allegiance? Are you bowing down to the cultural beasts of this age just to keep your job, your social status, or your financial comfort? And finally, the most important truth of all, the dragon is loud, the beast is terrifying. The political and economic systems of this world look absolutely invincible, but they are defeated enemies on a very short leash. John wrote this entire book to tell a persecuted, dying church one simple thing: the Lamb wins. And if you stand with him, no matter what it costs you in this life, you win too. Which of the Revelation beasts and its historical reality surprised you the most? Let me know down in the comments. And if this journey changed the way you read your Bible, make sure to subscribe to the channel. We have so much more of the ancient world